Welcome back to Simplifying the State, the podcast where we break down politics so you don't have to check your phone at lunch to try and understand why Southeast Asia is in turmoil again. As always, I'm Adam Watson.
And I'm Nicholas Perrin.
All right, before we begin, if you would be so kind as to rate us 5 stars on the place that you're listening, as well as share this podcast with a friend, because if you enjoy it, they might as well. And make sure to follow this podcast wherever you're listening to it so that you are always alerted whenever we release a new episode. All that will be greatly appreciated. Okay, so Nicholas, what do Alabama, Florida, and Georgia all have in common?
Are they all states that are in the southern United States?
That is one thing they all have in common, but what I was looking for is they are all states that have, in some way or another, through their legislator, passed bills to ban cell phones within school. And that's going to be what our topic is today, which is the phone bans that have occurred here in Missouri and kind of how that plays into the larger national conversation that's going on between states and their school's position on having phones in school hours. So Nicholas, you want to give us kind of a rundown of what schools have what states don't?
Yeah. So in most states in the United States, like a little over average, and Washington, D.C., there have been policy requirements in place for schools regarding cell phone restriction. Will allow schools to have autonomy in how they will implement their policies. However, in 4 states, Utah, Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana, there is a specific policy outlined for all schools to follow. For example, in Florida, elementary and middle schoolers will not be able to use wireless phones during the school day. However, high schoolers will be able to use them outside of class, for example, in lunch or in passing periods, or when the teacher permits them to do so in class. Florida is interesting because it was the first state to pass legislation restricting cell phone usage in the classroom in 2023. During that time, they allowed schools to choose how exactly they would enact their policies and what specifics would be in place. However, now they don't. Now, after Florida, most states followed very quickly to implement their own restrictions. Some states recommend a policy that would be adopted, but don't require it. And what it should look like is written in bills that have been passed by state legislation. For example, Alaska, Washington, Connecticut, Kansas, and South Dakota. The last kind of legislation that's been passed in 2 states have been bills that incentivize schools to restrict cell phone usage by, in Pennsylvania's case, to give grants to schools that would buy cell phone pockets in order to hold students' phones for the school day. There are exceptions to all of these bans, usually having to do with IEPs or medical conditions where someone would need to contact their parents about something, like diabetes. And these bans have seen wide support from educators and lawmakers, with some legislation in Florida, for example, passing with 100% approval from their state house. And looking at educators' opinions, only 17% of teachers want cell phones in the classroom, but 51% would like to have them in school for safety concerns. And you would expect that students are not happy about these cell phone bans, which they are not. And neither are their parents. As a poll in March from last year saw 71% of parents wanting students to have phones in school, and 38% in the classroom. Meanwhile, students were 91% in favor to have cell phones in school, and 56% of them were in favor of having them in class. However, in recent years, adults have generally become less enthusiastic about allowing phones in schools because some studies have shown the lack of cell phones aids in lowering fights and threats at schools or in schools. So, Adam, what about Missouri?
Right. So recently in July, the Missouri legislature passed a bill which was then sent to the governor, which he signed alongside several other bills, which prohibits phones within schools at all times. So I'm just going to read a little bit of language from the bill. It says that beginning in the 2025 to 2026 school year, each school district and charter school shall adopt a written policy regarding students' possession or use of electronic personal communication devices. Such a policy shall be designed to promote students' educational interests and ensure a safe, effective working environment for staff and volunteers. At a minimum, the policy shall prohibit students from using or displaying these devices from the beginning until the end of the school day, including but not limited to during instructional time, mealtime, breaks, and between classes and study halls. The policy shall also outline disciplinary procedures for violations and include exceptions for students who need devices due to specific educational or health needs, such as individualized education plans or 504 plans under federal law. So this is a fairly one of the most extreme phone policies in the nation, which just according to the language of the bill, is a complete and outright ban of cell phones during school hours, meaning not just during class time, which has been the norm. Most schools don't allow you to have phones during class time, but this one goes a step further, which bans it completely during school hours, meaning even like it said at lunchtime, if you're in the hallway, if you're on break, stuff like that. This provision is, according to the bill, is set to expire August 28th, 2032. So it's here, definitely past when any of us are graduating high school. But in terms of polling about the policy itself, that voters have seemed fairly positive towards this bill. There was a St. Louis University SLU/YouGov poll that was conducted, and approximately 4 of 5 likely voters, about 79%, supported prohibiting students from accessing their phones during class. Overwhelming support was indicated based on political party. Young voters were more open to cell phone restrictions during class, with only 57% indicating support. So by party, 80 in terms, high schoolers should be prohibited from accessing their cell phones during regular school hours. That was the question asked respondents. 82% of Republicans said yes, 69% of Democrats said yes, and 72% and all voters said 72% of all voters said yes. That was during regular school hours. When it comes to just using it during class, 85% of Republicans say they should not be allowed to use their phones during class. 72% of Democrats say they should not be allowed to use their phones during class. 79% of all voters said they should not be allowed to use their phones during class. So it seems as though more people support not allowing kids to have their phones during class than there are those who support kids having their phones during school. It's also worth pointing out that not sure column was much higher in the school hours as opposed to during class. 7% of Republicans, 15% of Democrats, and 12% of all voters said they weren't sure during all school hours, as opposed to just 5% of Republicans, 9% of Democrats, and 7% of all voters saying they don't know during class. So it's clear that doing a phone ban during class is more popular than doing it for all the school hours. So some concerns that people have are, what if they need to reach their child during an emergency, like a school shooting? We have a lot of those in America, unfortunately, or a tornado, or an earthquake, or something like that, like a natural disaster, where possibly they aren't able to reach the front desk, where there are just so many people trying to call the front desk that they can't get to every kid. So that's one thing that people might have concerns about, is being able to reach their child. Another concern that people may have, that some have raised, is the fact that it could harm student-teacher relationships if the teacher is taking something like their phone from the student, that could possibly foster some animosity between the student towards the teacher. But that's not, but from what I read, that isn't a widely shared concern among many. But another concern that I saw was, one person said that it could make students feel less like this is a learning environment, more so like a prison, because you're if your phone's being taken away, you're kind of not allowed to leave school unless you get a parent to come get you. So it could make kids feel like they're in a place where they don't have a lot of freedom. That was what they were basically saying. Nicholas, what do you think about these potential concerns?
I mean, with the concerns of like students' mental health, which is also a big reason for wanting to pass these bills that restrict phone use, taking away students' phones and creating that like prison-like environment, like you said, could it make their mental health even worse and just not make things any better? And it might be, yeah, it might cause more problems than it solves. And then for the natural disasters and the risk of school shootings, it might become very dangerous. Yeah, I don't think it would be, personally, I don't think it would be a great change overall, but I'm a student, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we have bias. We obviously don't want to have our phones taken away. But I mean, yeah, the concern about natural disasters, I feel like, is kind of prevalent here in Clayton, given the tornado we just had, because I feel like if we hadn't been able to get into quick contact with our parents, just kind of let them know we were okay or like find out if they were okay, that would have probably made everyone very concerned and made the situation even worse. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. Like with what I said previously, yeah, the natural disaster aspect, especially with the tornado being in recent memory, definitely doesn't help with a lot of people's concerns over that kind of stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening to Simplifying the State. We'll be back next week with our next episode about the current conflict going on in Southeast Asia between Thailand and Cambodia. Kind of see what's going on there, kind of break that down. But as we said at the beginning, make sure to rate the episode. If you like it, share it with a friend, follow, all that stuff. And yeah, we'll see you next time.